Hello and welcome to my Master's Guide for Pokémon Unite. Know that my recommendations come from a place of learning and experimentation. Pokémon Unite was my first and only experience with the MOBA genre, so everything I know I had to learn from scratch. Despite this, I managed to make it into Master Rank well before the first season concluded, all whilst remaining free to play. As such, I know for a fact that what I have to say can and has worked, so hopefully I can help your own success in matches whether you are in Masters or not. For today's topic, we'll be going over the details related to combat with opposing player controlled Pokemon, a very fundamental aspect to the game, and yet one that many of my fellow Masters players seem to have critical failings in regardless. Let's keep it simple to begin and cover a 1 versus 1 scenario. You're roaming around the map, and all of a sudden an opposing player jumps out of the grass and attacks. Depending on the specifics of this engagement, you may be on equal footing, or one of you may have a substantial advantage. The first thing you are likely to take note of is the opponent's Pokemon. Naturally, depending on who the opponent is playing, what you should expect will change in turn. Your goal is to assess as fast as you can the chances of defeating your foe. The longer you take, the less time you have to decide if you will flee or fight. Perhaps you're playing a lone defender like Blastoise and you are attacked by an attacker like Greninja. If you are both the same level and have max HP, you may decide to duel the Greninja. Blastoise is able to lock down his opponents with powerful stuns and can deal solid damage at range whilst taking even more. Greninja, on the other hand, can do excellent range damage with some mobility, but is relatively squishy. Victory here is not guaranteed, but possible. On the other hand, maybe you have allies nearby on the map, and if not, a friendly goal. In such a case, you may attempt to trick the Greninja into following you over to them. Of course, you may also just want to get away anyway. And what if you were not Blastoise? Mamoswine is another defender, but has a comparatively far lower damage output and attack range than Blastoise. Fighting Greninja 1v1 is still possible, but far less even than Blastoise, thus making retreating more of a favourable option. All of that was considering a scenario where both players are relatively equal. If your opponent is higher leveled than you, even if just by a little, I would highly recommend you either enter a friendly goal, find a teammate, or both. The increase of power per level is different for each Pokemon, but as a general rule, being one level higher pushes a 1v1 in your favour dramatically, and eventually, if the level gap grows more, it can become impossible for the underleveled Pokemon to win. Additionally, if you were, let's say, a Ralts, and you were ambushed by a Zeraora...
Here's Johnny!
Well, honestly, you would be lucky if you lived long enough to decide you want to run away. Not all Pokemon are created equal, and Ralts is, sadly, one of the weakest Pokemon in the game. Zeraora, on the other hand, is very proficient from an early stage. Some Pokemon are consistently growing, whilst others spike. In a 1v1, compare your opponent's Pokemon to your own as well as the HP and levels. If it turns out you're currently at your Pokemon's best, or you have a good HP and EXP lead, then you may have a winning fight on your hands. If you are playing a Pokemon during its weaker phases, you should try to keep an awareness of your surroundings. How far are you from your nearest goal? Where are your teammates? And can you see all of the enemies on the minimap? Using this information wisely could inform you that perhaps wandering off alone as a Ralts right now may not be worth attacking that wild Apom. Alternatively, what if you are the aggressor? Deciding to engage an opponent before they attack you is a valid strategy and may catch the opponent off guard. Many of the previous points are still up for consideration when on the attack. Do you outlevel them? Is their HP low? Are you a character that has not reached its power spike whilst they have? However, there are some new aspects as well. Just because your target is alone right now, it doesn't mean that they will be for long once attacked. Try to look at the minimap and the enemy respawn timers to figure out the rough positions of as many enemies as you can, then decide how plausible it is for them to all arrive once you start attacking. Based on your own judgment, I would say that unless you know you can kill the target quickly, whilst there is a risk of more foes appearing, perhaps try to do something else productive, like farming or supporting your teammates. Another thing you should keep in mind when plotting an attack is the current state of the objectives. Typically, an objective will either be contested or left alone due to the majority of players already being engaged in a fight. Let's say you are on your way to support your team taking out a Dreadnought, because you understand that Dreadnought is important and shouldn't be ignored, don't you? But you come across a single enemy who is also on their way. Using previous points, could you realistically take them? If you choose to fight and are outmatched, you may barely make a dent whilst getting KO'd yourself, allowing that enemy to then go and steal Dreadnought. Even more so if the Pokemon was a threatening one, such as an over-leveled Lucario. In such a case, it may instead be better to join the team and throw out as much damage as possible to capture the objective in time. Likewise, your Pokemon of choice may at least be capable of stalling that powerful foe with stuns and knockups, in which case your sacrifice may not be in vain, especially if it is you who outmatches the enemy and can safely remove them from the equation. Basically, try and think on whether the team will benefit more from your participation with the objective directly, or by fighting and potentially dying against the enemy. Also, please consider how initiating a fight may affect your teammates. If you have two allies at low HP after a recent battle, and you decided to aggravate the opponent's Talonflame, the worst thing you could do is then bring that Talonflame over to the bush that your allies are in the middle of teleporting from, killing you all. If that sounds specific, that's because it happened to me. Of course, teammates may be ready to participate in a fight alongside you. When you band together, your options expand considerably. Everything we covered before still applies, but now you must consider more interactions. Perhaps alone you didn't have enough damage to defeat the Zeraora, but now you have a Ninetales, you can stun him for just long enough to get the kill. Here are some very important points to keep in mind when you start an attack with teammates. Do not, and I repeat, do not leave the fight whilst it's going on, especially whilst you are winning. I cannot count the amount of times I've had this happen to me. 2 of us, 3 of us, it doesn't matter, there almost always seems to be that one guy who has the highest HP and is the most afraid of losing the 2v1 you have almost won anyway. You could say that it is in fact foolish to put the faith of common sense into your teammates whilst playing solo queue, and that is probably fair. However, it wouldn't be an issue in the first place if people just stuck it out. A numbers advantage can clutch wins against opponents you normally had no business in defeating. If you are part of such attack, do not let up unless you are completely out of position and more enemies shows up. This goes double when you have full HP and are in the back anyway. Defeating the opponent may snowball the early game, or catch up your levels if you are behind. Sometimes a teammate will run right to the enemy goal and start a poorly planned fight. You must then assess the odds of success. If you could win, maybe engage. If the outlook is grim, either write a very nice funeral note for the player's family, or try to use your moves to delay the enemy long enough for your ally to escape, so long as it doesn't put you in too much danger. If your friend is of a higher level than the enemy, you must be careful in what you choose, as their death will boost the enemy, but your additional death would boost them even more. Most of the time though, people back down because they get scared seeing an ally reach low HP, or assume the ally has it by now. What is worse is the person who ditched the fight usually gets hunted down and killed anyway, when together you could have won. Sometimes, through no one's fault, a fight is clearly a losing affair, such as when the enemy Absol with buffs invades your lane. In these cases, a retreat to goal is warranted, but don't become a mindless animal as you trample over each other in fear and become easy kills. Be aware of both your own and your allies' HP, as well as what Pokemon you are playing compared to the opponent. Do you have any moves or traits that can be used to slow the attackers down long enough to secure an escape, even if it's just for one of you? Does the opponent possess any skills that either requires or negates those traits? Just by keeping these in mind, you may find yourselves getting wiped out less often. And that is all for this guide. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. I hope you keep my advice in mind and experiment a bit in your matches. Remember that standard matches exist for those who do not wish to consider such elements during gameplay, but if you enter ranked and choose to remain ignorant after losses, you are only being a liability to your team and your own success. Remember that until recently, I knew nothing about this sort of game, and of course, I too am still learning, but even I can see how many people in the master rank do not play like a master. I hope to see you again soon. This is the Mighty Emperor, signing off.